Hey, everybody, and welcome to the State Theater's Modesto Noir series. This week, we're going to be talking about Humphrey Bogart and Mary Astor in The Maltese Falcon. I'm Arnold Schmidt. I teach literature and film and creative writing at California State University, Stanislaus. I'm joined by Randy Siefkin, retired professor of political science at Modesto Junior College. And want to say hi, Randy?
Yeah, I'm weighing in. I'm here and pleased to be with Arnold on the last in our series of 5 film noirs. We will be joined in our discussion of Maltese Falcon with Jim Johnson, the artistic director of the Gallo Center for the Arts, and 3 of his players in the recreated radio broadcast of the Maltese Falcon. All of this taking place on Thursday evening, August, I've lost track of the year, another year, August the 19th. So we invite you to join us for this discussion of the film and of the radio broadcast, along with Jim and the cast of the broadcast and extra added attraction, Wes Page, who was the cinematographer for this radio broadcast. And you will be amazed at the tricks that he was able to perform around this wonderful radio play and film.
And Wes always has something. He always pulls a trick out of his bag and shows us how he's doing these with blue screen and with the actors and props, and it's really a lot of fun. So now a little bit about The Maltese Falcon, which was written by Dashiell Hammett. He is an American writer associated mostly with San Francisco, lived in New York for a while as well. Hammett starts out working for the Pinkertons, which was a kind of private security firm. And he was supposedly sent up to do some strike breaking, and he'd overheard a plan to kill one of the union guys, and he didn't want any part of it. And then later, when he heard that that guy had actually been killed, he left the Pinkertons, and really at that point becomes very critical of capitalism, of American society in a lot of ways. His politics are certainly on the left. He serves in the military during the war. But after the war, because of his associations with different civil rights groups and political action groups, he gets called in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee. He actually served some time in prison. At the same time, other people who were protesting the House Un-American Activities Committee and their investigation into Hollywood included Humphrey Bogart, who's obviously in The Maltese Falcon, as well as his wife, Lauren Bacall, and then many others, including Lucille Ball, Danny Kaye, Judy Garland, and quite a pantheon of stars. Hammett had a long-term relationship with Lillian Hellman. He was a reader for some of her plays, and he did do some screenplays based on these. And she also is a very influential writer. Her plays are great. They recently did Watch on the Rhine at the Prospect here in Modesto, and did a great production of it. So she's a very, very interesting person. Edited a lot of his work late after he passed away. So Hammett wrote The Maltese Falcon while living on Post Street in San Francisco. And this is also the building that they think Sam Spade lived in. There's a lot of great research on Hammett in San Francisco and Sam Spade in San Francisco. There's a series of walking tours that you can take. So if you're in San Francisco, look it up. It's really a lot of fun. So on the left, you'll see the house, his apartment building. But on the right, you'll see on the top right, you'll see a poster, a plaque. And supposedly, this is an official plaque. And supposedly, when I did the walking tour, the leader said, this is the only plaque in America that's dedicated to a fictional character. Because usually a plaque is George Washington was born here, or Abraham Lincoln did this, or, and these are real people. But Miles Archer and Bridget O'Shaughnessy are not. So there's that. The bridge underneath this tunnel, keep your eye on, because I'm going to show you another shot of it. But this is where the murder takes place. The actual shooting takes place on the left-hand side. You'll see the street, and you can find these streets very easily in San Francisco. It's not far from Chinatown. On the right-hand side, you can see the bridge, that tunnel again, and the murder would have taken place on the top of above the tunnel, and the street that crosses the tunnel on the right-hand side, and the body would have fallen down. And so when in the book, when they go to look for it, he's fallen down this hill. So anyway, if you're in San Francisco, there's a lot of great stuff you can do walking around, both like a Hammett tour and a Maltese Falcon tour, quite a lot of fun. Hammett had immense success. He made quite a lot of money as a writer, had a great readership, and he's noted for creating a series of characters who really revolutionized the way that we think about detective fiction. Now, remember, up till at this point, we have investigative. The model for detective fiction was Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and Watson. In other words, they're kind of aloof people. They're a very high social class. They're not criminals in any way themselves. They're not really associated with crime. They're very well educated. And the crimes that they investigate are also really quirky. One of the comments that I read, a critic saying that, up until Hammett, they were figuring out how to kill somebody with a kind of a really weird poison, or in other words, it wasn't just a guy gets mad and shoots somebody, which is, we get a lot of in Hammett. So Hammett really brings the story of the detective fiction down to earth. At the same time, he also is his work is very dialogue heavy. And so he really spends a lot of time creating a certain kind of a banter, a certain kind of a patter that, people would have used at the time. So there's a lot of slang, and a lot of the, 20s and 30s and 40s kind of, the language is very, very redolent of that moment. So the characters, the detectives that he's most famous for are the Continental Op, he doesn't have a name. He's just working for the Continental. He's an operative for the Continental Detective Agency. In Red Harvest and the Dane Curse, both a lot of fun. Red Harvest is just this nutty, it takes place in a mining town, so people see it as, the kind of corruption that Hammett would have seen when he was sent to do the strike breaking. But his way of solving a problem is basically to get everybody in town to attack each other. And he just goes from person to person to person, pretending to be on their side. And then it just, Red Harvest there's a lot of blood at the end. It's a great read. It's a lot of fun. Dane Curse is also really good. Then we get Sam Spade, the Maltese Falcon. And, here he has a certain kind of personality. Both the Continental Op and Sam Spade are educated, as is Nora. Nick and Nora are both educated. One of the things that that we're getting is that these people are smart. They're also just tough. In Nick and Nora, Charles and the Thin Man, we're much more in a kind of an upper class. They solve crimes just for fun. They drink a lot. There's a really good article about how they change the way Americans look at cocktails. I actually, at one point when I was reading The Thin Man, I tried to figure out how much they're actually drinking in a day. And it's just 30 drinks. I mean, it's crazy. They just, Hammett drank a lot. He had problems with alcohol, but anyway, nobody could do what Nick and Nora does and actually walk, as far as I can see.
Or stand up.
Yeah, the Thin Man is famous, perhaps most famous, for spinning off a series of Thin Man movies. It has a great fox terrier in it, those really had a strong afterlife. And another thing that Hammett was involved with was creating a cartoon character, Secret Agent X9. These stories were published first in Black Mask, which was a detective fiction, an adventure fiction periodical, very influential. They published Chandler, published a lot of American writers of what we would think of as pulp fiction. And here you can see the Continental Op covers. Here's Red Harvest and the Dane Curse. These are really beautiful Art Deco designs. And then we come to the Maltese Falcon, which we're going to talk about later, but there are obviously a few different versions of this. The Thin Man with William Powell and Myrna Loy, and Astor as their dog. He's great in this, and these are a lot of fun. The movies are really quite fun, so worth putting on your list. And then Agent X9. These are the comic books that are based on some of Hammett's ideas and characters. The Maltese Falcon is certainly his most famous novel, and the book is very different than the movie. It's much darker. The image on the right is from a cover that shows Bridget O'Shaughnessy getting undressed. In the movie, nothing like this happens, but in the book, she's actually strip searched because there's a moment when he thinks she's stolen money. Gutman accuses her of stealing money. And in the movie, he just asks her and she says no. In the book, he actually searches her. Their affair is much more explicit, not explicit, but it's explicitly indicated in the book. And there's a couple of other things. There's a little bit more violence. The characters are a little bit different. The character of Gutman has his daughter with him, or someone that says he's his daughter. And the character of Wilmer is actually really sadistic. In the book, they try to trick Sam Spade to come to a hotel, which they do in the movie as well, but they do it by doing some awful things to the daughter and having her kind of call Sam for help. Well, it turns out that her father and Wilmer were in on it. So it's a dark movie, a dark book. A lot of the dialogue from the movie is directly from the book. In my view, it's the easiest screenplay in the world to write because you're basically just retyping it. So it's great fun. It's really really good. It was a very popular book, as is film noir generally, with the notions of existentialism, creating your own ethics, living in a relativistic universe where the sense of right and wrong is really hard to figure out. The end of the book as the end of the movie, where Sam Spade sends Bridget O'Shaughnessy over for the crime, is this kind of, in the book, it's a page or two of him trying to explain these kinds of ethics. So it's a very, very good read. It's short and it's a lot of fun. So totally worth checking out.
So why do you suppose that the film is not as explicit as the first edition?
I think it has to be just the censorship of the time. If you think about the Big Sleep, there's the scene with him with the woman in the bookstore, and in the novel, that's a much more explicit scene. Also in Maltese Falcon, Cairo is very explicitly gay. He's having a thing with Wilmer, and at the end, he's kind of holding Wilmer's hand. So the characters are a lot more like real life in a certain sense. There's more, it's not as sanitized. But yeah, I just don't think you could have gotten that through in Hollywood at that time. Agreed. So this movie is not the only one, as Randy is going to tell us.
Yes, actually, there are two previous Maltese Falcons. By the way, the studio executives some of them did not want the film to be called The Maltese Falcon. Their suggestion was The Gent from Frisco.
Good Lord.
Wrong,
Wow.
absolutely wrong. But fortunately, John Huston held out for the original
There
title.
isn't even a plane in it. There isn't a plane in the book or the movie that comes by
No,
boat.
you would think if you're a studio executive.
Oh,
The one we're going to talk about, the 1942 version, is not to be confused with the 1931 version of the film, which one critic said has all the energy and the zest of an army training film about venereal disease.
great.
But if you ever watch it, it is a pre-code movie, and there are several scenes which would not have passed muster under the Hays Code that came into effect in 1934. Nor is it to be confused with this one from 1936, which is a comedic version of the Hammett novel starring Betty Davis. And in fact, there are those who say this was primarily a vehicle to promote her.
Boy, another terrible title.
Yeah, yes, it is. And it's not a fabulous movie either. Did not do all that well at the box office. The director of this film is John Huston, who had a reputation for, this is his first directorial effort, and he impressed the studio executives by bringing in the film on time and on budget of about $300,000. He was very meticulous, sketched out every scene, but was willing to listen to the actors when they recommended changes. Bogart and Huston had worked together earlier on the film High Sierra. The film was shot over 6 weeks, and most of it was done in sequence. Arnold is going to talk a bit about the cinematographer in this film, Arthur Edson, who creates the atmosphere in this film and in subsequent Warner Brothers films.
And just a little bit about Houston. He's obviously the son of Walter Houston, grows up in a theatrical family, but he is really a kind of a Renaissance man. When Randy says he draws his own storyboards, he was an artist and had gone to art school both in Paris and in California. And so he's a writer, he's a director, he's an actor. He's really does amazing stuff. He's known for a kind of a gritty realism. The Asphalt Jungle is again that kind of another noir. African Queen with Katharine Hepburn. The Man Who Would Be King is great. It's a lot of fun, and Prizzi's Honor. So he's a really interesting actor. And I have to say, all of the pictures I found of him have him looking to the right. So I think I was surprised to see Randy's picture of him looking to the left. I wonder if somebody just flipped the negative.
It reversed the negative.
Exactly.
So the star of this film is obviously Humphrey Bogart, holding on to his friend there. George Raft, who was a character actor and a major studio actor in the 1930s and 1940s and even into the 1950s, was offered the role and dismissed it. He said this was an unimportant picture directed by an unknown director with a paltry budget and a remake of 2 earlier versions, and his contract said he was not to be forced to do any remakes. So he turned it down. Bogart, who made something like 40 plus films before the Maltese Falcon, usually played a gangster and is quoted as saying, "I've made more lousy pictures than any other actor in history," which I think is an astounding admission. But in this film, he transitions from the bad guy, which he usually played, to Bogart the detective, and establishes an archetype for future detectives in film. And you see all of the action, with one exception, from his perspective. I think the only scene he's not in, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Arnold, is the Archer, where Archer is killed. But beyond that, it's Bogart who carries the show.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And actually, we don't see the scene where Archer is killed.
No.
So yeah, and this in a certain sense is a hallmark of detective fiction. The idea that we as the audience don't know any more than the detective, and so if he or she can figure it out, well, we're just boneheaded if we didn't figure it out also. But of course, we almost never do.
Wasn't
But this.
obvious.
Yeah. So yeah, he gives us all the information, and he's at all of these situations. So this is in terms of point of view, it's very much driven by this character.
And he is joined. This is a Houston selection because Houston picked the cast members here by Mary Astor, who considered this script a humdinger and lobbied for the role of Bridget O'Shaughnessy. Fascinating. Houston said she played the enchanting murderess to perfection. She had won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress in 1941, but she was a veteran of film stretching back to the silent era. She normally would play a sophisticated, malicious, manipulative woman of the world. She's quoted as saying, when you see her on screen, you will note that she seems on the precipice of hysteria regularly. And she said she used to hyperventilate before going into most of the scenes to accentuate that. And here are Bogart and Astor. Houston, by the way, was so impressed with the chemistry between the two, Bogart and Astor, that in his film Across the Pacific, he reintroduced them in a rather seamy relationship for that particular era. And here are, I thought the comment from Hal Wallace here that Bogart's presentations were a little too slow.
It shows that he just doesn't get it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the point, you know?
He's only a producer. And Astor loved working with Bogart, how open he was. And he kept all of the other actors on their respective toes. So I think one of the outstanding characters in this film is Sidney Greenstreet as Caspar Gutman, a Broadway actor, had no film experience until this one. Houston liked his size. He was a very big man, anywhere between 280 and 350 pounds. He had a distinctive laugh. His eyes were, I think, very riveting and always had a little bit of a twinkle in them. And his diction. He's referred to throughout as the Fat Man, and he was indeed. The Warner Brothers wardrobe department had to specially make his costumes. By the way, I want you to pay particular attention in the final scenes with the Falcon as he attacks the bird with his penknife. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So Greenstreet is joined by Peter Lorre, whose reputation had been, as an international star, had been cemented by his role as the pedophile murderer in the film M, which I strongly suggest to our audience. There's a new Blu-ray of M out there. It's just an outstanding film that employs many of the techniques of the German film industry from the 1920s and 1930s.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. I would second that recommendation. It's a great one from UFA. Even though the subject matter is kind of grisly, it's not a film where we see violence, and in fact, it uses music as a way
Yes.
a kind of a revolutionary way to identify the characters. And so it's really, really effectively done.
One critic said that he was permed up and permed up and slimmed down version of old world decadence, and made an ideal foil for Greenstreet. Interesting to note that Joe Cairo here is one of the objections by the censors was that he was portrayed as gay, and they dislike that. There's a note in the letter to Houston noting that he was portrayed as a quote pansy, quote unquote.
And that's certainly toned down from the novel, which is a lot more explicit.
Yes,
all the way through.
And
in
if
identification,
you
not in explicitly showing anything, but.
And if you follow the career of Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre, you will note that they were paired together 8 more times. That chemistry was obvious to Hollywood executives.
Yeah, they did a bunch of great stuff, including The Mask of Demetrius, and is it 7 Graves to Cairo? Is that?
Yes, I believe so, and of course Casablanca.
Right.
The Blue Parrot and Save Me, Rick, save me. Where were those passports? Those letters of, yes. In the piano, look at the piano. The Gunman. Alicia Cook Jr. as Wilmer the Gunsel. What does Gunsel mean anyway? Arnold?
Oh, I'm thinking it's gunslinger or something like that, but.
Yeah, it may be a more explicit reference than that, and the industry censors missed it entirely.
Oh, okay.
It may have some sexual connotation according to, but in this context, it's he's the fall guy or the stool pigeon in this movie. Eddie Muller, the noir czar of noir, says he was Hollywood's worm of choice.
Yeah, although I have to say, in The Big Sleep, he's actually quite a noble character. I mean, he's still a gunman and and all of that, but he's in love with this woman who doesn't love him and who's using him, and she's a terrible character, and he gives his life to save her life. So he's really in that he's really quite noble, but he certainly isn't noble here.
No, absolutely not. He wasn't a very social person. He lived in the Sierras, absolutely alone. He tied flies and he fished. He didn't have a phone, so when the studios wanted to sign him for a picture, they'd have to send a quote man unquote to his cabin and fill him in.
Oh, that's great. Walter Houston, John Huston's father, plays Captain Jacoby, who in the movie has no lines. I think he just says the bird or something, but in the book he doesn't have. It's about the same thing. But he is this really kind of powerful character, and Walter Houston has was started in as Abraham Lincoln. He's did some early films with Griffith. He does Sierra Madre. He's done a lot of great stuff. One of the things that I came across is that apparently his son was playing a joke on him and making him do the scene over and over and over, even though when you look at the scene, it's probably 30 seconds. And most of the time he walks in, falls down, and dies. So it is a really funny little thing, but he's good at it. So
I did read, Arnold, that one of the conditions to have his dad in the film, Houston had to agree that he wouldn't be paid.
Oh, well. That's how he kept it under budget.
Yeah, I guess that was part of it. So here is Humphrey Bogart and the bird. Is this, do you think, is a metaphor here for the pursuit of wealth, of greed? Is it a MacGuffin? I don't know. A good subject to discuss in our post-film discussion.
And just again, for people who are thinking of reading the book, in the novel, there's probably more than 2 full pages explaining the history of the Crusades, of the bird, of Malta, who the king was. And it really traces, there's a scene in the movie where Gutman kind of lays this out, but it's really just a half a page of dialogue. In the book, it's very interesting and very kind of plausible. And also, Effie, who is Sam Spade's secretary, has a brother who just happens to teach medieval history at Berkeley. And so they're able to kind of figure all of this out, because Gutman, who also has a kind of a great memory in the book and in the movie too, pretty much. But he's quoting different medieval French sources and late classical, you know, the kind of Mediterranean sources about this. And Sam Spade, who also has a good memory. In fact, there's a moment in the movie where he says, "I went to college. I can speak English if I have to." But he when talking to Effie, just rattles off all of these titles that he remembered them too. So there's a lot more of the history with the bird, which is really quite interesting.
And obviously, this is not something that's going to be included in a Hollywood movie. They did put in an intertitle at the beginning of the film that briefly explains some of the background. And I think that was designed to decomplicate the plot a bit.
Yeah.
So allegedly, this bird weighed 45 pounds, was made of lead, 12 inches tall, not like ours, Arnold. We both have.
Which are plastic.
Or something, or composite. And allegedly, the 2 falcons, one of which was dropped by Humphrey Bogart, so the tail feathers are bent. Allegedly, that one of the 2 was auctioned off several years ago for $4 million. I have read, however, a story that says that the special effects people at Warner Brothers would never have made a 45-pound statuette to be passed back and forth by actors. Maybe the stunt person would do it. So the provenance of this particular falcon may be in question and may not be worth $4 million, but that was what was paid at auction in 2013.
Well, mine is much lighter, so it must be the real one.
I think we can claim, no, mine is real. But I haven't attacked it with a penknife like
No.
Gut does in this particular. I think this scene is striking because of the greed in the eyes of all the characters in this scene, including Bogart.
Yeah.
Who's taking money regularly from all the different sides here and expects a certain payoff for his role in locating the falcon and hanging on to it and bringing it to the players here.
Yeah, and this is true both in the book and the movie. There is a way that it's very hard to figure out how honest Bogart is at any given point. At the end, it seems as though he's just pretending, and in a certain sense, it raises the question of what does it mean to be an honest person? You know, like to be in society and to be honest. How much of it is just a social game that we play? And so it's, again, you can see why the existentialists really, like these kinds of films, because it raises this notion of the kind of performativity of ethics, of social values. Bogart's explanation to O'Shaughnessy about why he has to execute her at the end or send her to the police at the end is in the book, he has 7 reasons and he lists them all. And then he says, there are more, but you get the idea. But the reasons go back and forth, like, is he ethical? Is it self-interest? It's a very interesting character.
And here's the line that Bogart uses at the conclusion of the film, a line from Shakespeare's The Tempest. It's not in the novel. It was Bogart's
No.
idea, and it was included because Bogart insisted. Houston wasn't so sure. But if you're interested in factoids, this really isn't the last line of the film. The last line of the film is Ward Bond, one of the detectives, saying, "Huh?"
Yeah. And
Ward, go ahead.
certainly the Tempest, with Prospero as somebody who can make dreams happen and who also manipulates all of the different characters in order to make things happen the way he wants them to happen, who is, certainly in control a lot more than Bogart is in control. But there is that, there certainly have some parallels there.
So, interesting fact about Ward Bond. He was recruited from the USC football team in the late 1920s to play in a number of Hollywood films, along with some guy named Marion Morrison, who later became John Wayne.
Okay, yeah, I knew. Okay, yeah.
And if you think about John Wayne movies, Ward Bond is a regular character.
Oh,
in
he's in a ton of Westerns. Yeah.
Yes.
And cop movies, yeah.
Yes. It's because of that relationship.
Oh, that's funny. So the film has a really nice look, and the cinematographer Arthur Edson was one of the founding members of the American Society of Cinematographers. He had done some silent films with Douglas Fairbanks Sr., Thief of Baghdad, but he also shot Frankenstein. If you think about films with really interesting, unique visual styles and in a certain sense different, Frankenstein, the Maltese Falcon, and Casablanca. All of these are influenced by German Expressionism, by UFA, by the that school of artisans, directors and writers and actors who left Germany when the Weimar Republic collapsed and come to the States. And end up in Hollywood, including Brecht and others. But anyway, they bring with them this particular style of film, which we would also see in M, if you go back and think about watching that. But here, the scene from Frankenstein, really nicely lighted. The scene in the bottom left for Casablanca, and again, this kind of use of shadows, use of kind of smoke, really nicely done. And we see a lot of the work in Maltese Falcon is classic noir, which means mostly it's at night. We're going to see a lot of lights. We're going to see a lot of reflections. We're going to see a lot of blinds from windows, window blinds, lots and lots of shadows, and all of that kind of stuff.
So, questions to ponder for our discussion next week. Arnold and I have been going back and forth on whether this is, in fact, the first film noir. Some people say it is, others say no, there are a number of predecessors. Is Spade an anti-hero? You think about his character and some of the compromises that he makes along the way, removing his partner's name almost immediately from the detective agency, for instance.
Yeah. And in the book, he's very explicitly having an affair with Archer's wife. And in fact, the last sentence or so in the book is her coming back. I don't get a sense that he wants to continue the relationship. He sort of makes it sound like he's kind of did this and he regrets it. And that's at least what he tells Effie. But he says right away that he disliked Archer, and he isn't, he's sad to have his partner killed, but he's not sad to have Archer killed.
Yeah. And you do have to do something when your partner is killed.
Right, but it's interesting that it's like the category of partner rather than the emotional relationship of this guy I work with.
yeah, right. Him. And it looked like his desk was much smaller. in Archer and Spade.
Uh,
Some people regard this film as really a kind of a screwball comedy, something we might want to kick around in the discussion, and whether the Falcon is in fact a metaphor. So you may have other questions. I suspect our participants are going to raise other issues. We hope you will join us and do your homework. By the way, I love this studio promotion on the left-hand side.
that is really great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the portrayal of Bogart with two guns in his hand.
Right, which what
You never
happens
know.
when he picks up the guns from Wilmer, but he doesn't point them.
Never.
No.
But it's Hollywood, you know?
Right.
So watch the Gallo Center's recreation of the radio play, which you can access at their website anytime, because this was the first in a series of radio broadcasts that they had done. You can watch the film on your own. It's at the usual places, or if you want to see it on the big screen as it was intended to be seen, next Wednesday, August the 18th at 6 p.m., the state will be showing Maltese Falcon in all of its shadowy glory.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to be there because I haven't seen it on a big screen in a long time. And I have to say, noirs in particular, I mean, film and generally, of course, but noirs in particular were the photography, the cinematography is so important. You want to see it on a big screen. You want to see a nice print, and it should be a lot of fun.
You still there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sounded like it dropped off. And I understand, the rumor has it you're going to bring your Falcon?
I could bring my Falcon, then we'd have dueling Falcons.
You're right. we should do that. Okay. And finally, if you'd like to participate in the discussion of the radio play and the film with the Gallo radio players and Arnold and I, the State Theater's film fanatics, you can do that on August the 19th at 7 p.m., obviously virtual. You can register at the State Theater's website. There's no charge for participating in the discussion. You can ask questions and attempt to dumbfound us all as we search for the answers.
It's certainly easy enough to do. And one thing I have to say, this is the last in our sequence of 5 events. And so I think, part of the discussion toward the end here will be, what are we seeing in all of these different noirs, except of course, Arsenic and Old Lace. But the others really do kind of go, going back to The Hitchhiker, going back to these other films that we watched, and we can talk about themes, we can compare characters. So I think there's something kind of very, potentially very fruitful about thinking about all of these films and how they come together, what they say about American society in the 1940s, early 50s. Some really interesting things for us to think about.
And an opportunity to talk about whether we ought to continue with the noir series, hopefully on the big screen and not just virtually.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Bring your ideas and
do bring film suggestions.
Yes, absolutely. We would welcome those. So Arnold, it has been a pleasure.
It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. We thank everybody who's joined us for Modesto Noir. We were really excited about this, and we're really delighted about the way it's turned out. We've had a lot of fun with the folks from the Prospect Theater when they came on with actors and directors. We had a wonderful time with the Gallo Center people, and we're going to have more fun this week. So please join us.
And we thank you very much.
Okay.
Good. I thought that went well.
Yeah, that went really well. Let's hope the computer did its part and it doesn't do anything really bizarre, but we'll know in a few minutes. It records it to the cloud because I don't have enough memory on my computer. And so it goes to school and then they send me an email saying that it's coming. So once they do that, then I think we're set.
Well, do enjoy yourself. What are you going to do this afternoon?
Well, Robert Louis Stevenson lived up here.
Oh, yes.
And wrote a book called The Silverado Squatters, which is really fun. And there's a park of his. So we're going to go up to the park and do that. There's also Lily Langtry, and Catherine's done some writing on models of beauty in the 19th century. And so Lily Langtry owned a vineyard up here. And we visited her vineyard last time, but I don't think we were able, I think that we weren't able to buy anything. So now we may do a tasting up there. So this is up in St. Helena.
Right.
So it should be really fun. And this is the weather. I have to say the weather here is surprisingly good. We could see stars last night. It's funny when we were coming up, I looked at, the weather for the air quality for Turlock, and it was like 78, which is really bad. And it was 15 here. So we've been really, really lucky. I don't know which way the wind blows, but it's not coming here.
Yeah. It's only going to be 90 something here today. So usually.
Oh yeah, it's actually cool. It's but 90 is certainly nice, but
yeah. Good. Well, you guys have a fabulous time. When are you coming back?
We're back next Sunday.
Okay.
So I will be able to make the show, which is good because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to. But yeah, I want to see the movie. That'll be really fun.
Good.
And are you going to be able to be there or?
Yes. Oh yes. And I have, you can either have a Humphrey Bogart button or a Mary Astor button. It's your choice.
Oh, wow. And I'll have to dig out the Falcon. It's around somewhere. It may still be at school, but I'll try to track it down.
if you can't, I have it.
You have one. Yeah, it always impresses students when they come in and see it because there's all these academic books and all this kind of college professor nonsense, and then there's the Maltese Falcon.
Do they actually recognize it?
Some do. Yeah. It gets their attention.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, I will be surprised I'm always astounded at the number of people who've never seen it on the big screen.
Yeah.
So it's like Casablanca. How could you have missed this?
Yeah, and I think it's hard, again, when you go back to when, certainly when I was growing up, you were growing up, there were all these theaters that did double and triple features of these things.
Yeah.
And, the only theater doing that now is like the State. And, they're just not out there.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. It's in some ways, like, I was trying to think about this the other day, like we do not have an audience for certain films, but it's because people haven't seen those films to know that they want to see those films.
Right.
So, I think there's a role that we need to play in creating the audience. And I don't exactly know how to do that. But I think that's one of the things is like you want to show Faustbinder, well, you need to create an audience that wants to see Faustbinder.
Right.
And that's possible, but I don't know how we go about doing it. But certainly the series, maybe the musicals, maybe some of these others, maybe these will. And if we do the noir again, we do that World War II one again. Let's see how it all works out, especially at the Jewel, because that might be a different kind of experience. People, if we can get a cadre of people, there's 5 people who always come to these things no matter what, then they'll bring their friends, and that'll have a kind of a critical mass. So,
yeah, I'm hopeful, and I'm hopeful the studios will recognize the value of that and adjust their prices accordingly.
Yeah.
All right, my friend.
Good.
Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, and this was really fun, and I will see you at the movies.
All right. Sounds good. See you Wednesday night.
Take care.
You too.
Give my regards.
Yep. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.